Good afternoon. My name is Keith Whalen from RPI Consultants, and I'm pleased to welcome you to RPI's Winter Webinar Series. For our final presentation of today, we will be focused on change management. We have our two change management gurus here, Ms. Sarah Concanon and Mr. Daniel Janab. If you've watched some of our other presentations today, you know it is a key component in a successful CloudSuite transformation migration. We welcome questions. The harder the better. Please challenge them. There's a bonus for whoever stumps them. And with that, I give you Miss Sarah and Mr. Daniel.
Thank you very much for that intro, Keith. So here, thanks for hanging in with us today at the end of your day to learn a little bit about Change Management 101, or how I stopped worrying and embraced the change. Let's go through our agenda today. We're going to start off with some brief introductions for Daniel and myself. Then we will establish a basic understanding of what is change management. So we're all on the same page about what we're talking about here. Why it is investing in your success. Then we'll talk about CloudSuite implementations and change management. And we'll finish it up with RPI's approach to change management before we get to any questions that you may have to try to stump us for the prize Keith has offered to you.
So first, a little bit about ourselves. As Keith did say, my name is Daniel Janab, and I'm a change manager here at RPI Consultants. I am ProSci certified as a change practitioner. And a little bit about my background. I am a former project manager. And you'll find that in dealing with change managers, there is a lot of crossover between change management and project management. I am based out of RPI's Kansas City office, and I do like to consider myself the de facto office personal trainer and nutritionist. Because remember, folks, a personal health check is just as important as a solution health check.
And I am Sarah Concanon. I am also a change manager here at RPI. I am ProSci certified as well as a change practitioner. And just for anybody who's not familiar with what ProSci is, they are the global and industry leader in change management methodology and models. I am also a project manager and a supply chain consultant, so I've worn many hats here. And last but not least, I'm a digital artist and teacher. And I have the honor of having a piece of my artwork hung in all of the RPI offices. Exciting. All right, let's get to the good stuff and talk about.
Yeah, so really diving into the meat of the presentation here. So what exactly is it we're talking about when we say change management? The definition of change management is really conglomeration of the processes, tools, and techniques used to manage the people side of organizational change in order to achieve desired business outcomes. So processes, tools, and techniques, what we mean by that is that change management is integrated with your project plan. We cover resistance and risk mitigation, and we like to create feedback loops and follow up with specific individuals. People-focused change management is very, very focused on, of course, the people side of change. So what we do there is we work to build awareness by promoting organizational communication plans. We seek to empower and activate key roles such as people managers. And really, we focus on encouragement to adapt and to adopt for the future state. And finally, business outcomes. Of course, you don't do a project for no reason. Ultimately speaking, you do a project to achieve a desired business outcome. And with change management, we help you achieve your project objectives more quickly and more completely. So that's the dictionary definition of change management. But I think change management as a service means something beyond just its definition. So going back, taking just a step back and looking holistically at consulting in general, this is really a customer service job. And it sometimes may not feel like it because everyone has certain preconceived thoughts about traditional customer service jobs. But ultimately, every project that we do at RPI is done for you, our customers. And I think that change management is really the customer service division of the customer service company. And I feel like it demonstrates a higher level of care and consideration, not just for project objective purposes, but for people purposes. It's not what can we do for you from a technical sense, it's what we can do for you from a people sense. So with that in mind, Sarah, what are the usual phases of change management that we see in projects?
So we have here a nice visual of the 3 basic phases of change management. Nothing complicated, but what this is really showing you goes a little bit beyond just the phases and kind of talking about the overall structure of change management. It's a little bit like a layer cake. So for organizational change from that high level perspective, you have the current state, which is, operations as usual, people doing jobs that they're accustomed to, the way that they're accustomed to doing them. In order to make a change, you have to move into a state of transition where people are learning new things, they're adapting to the change, they're getting the ability to actually act out those changes, do their jobs a little bit differently usually. Of course, the last state is the future state. It's where you plan to arrive at once you have successfully moved through that transition state. But every organizational change is really made up of individuals who have to change and that are hopefully doing it together. And all of that is underpinned by change management. So we have our change management phases that align with the change phases that the organization is going through. While you're still in the current state, you're planning, you're preparing. What's the right scale? What's the right approach for this organization? What's their change readiness, change hardiness? What are their particular risk factors? And then as we move into the transition state with the client, the focus is around managing that, moving everybody through the change elements and at the right pace so that everybody's ready for go live. And once you've achieved that future state and you're in your post go live world, how do we reinforce that change that everyone has succeeded at so that we don't lose anything, we don't backslide? We're able to maintain that change and grow it forward into the future. So let's talk a little bit about why change management is really investing in your success. Now, if I stood here and told you that every project in the world needed change management, I would be lying to you. As excited as I am personally about change management and as important as I know it is to many projects, when you're thinking about whether or not change management is important to your project or initiative and how important it is to your project and initiative, the question that you need to ask yourself is how much of the ROI on this project, the return on the investment that I'm making in it, and my success really depends on adoption and usage or really any change in people's behavior. So we like to give these 2 examples to kind of help people contextualize the different ends of the spectrum when it comes to people-dependent ROI. So on the very low or no people-dependent side of the scale, you're going to have something like installing motion-activated lights in a meeting room. Nobody's there, there's no motion, lights automatically go off after 10 minutes or so. Nobody needs to change what they're doing. You save money, you save energy. Awesome, it's a success. And then you have something that's high people dependency. That might be something like installing recycling and or composting bins in the office. Unless people start using those bins and sorting the materials and they stop throwing everything into the trash, that initiative is a failure. It's completely dependent on people changing their normal behaviors in order to make it work and in order for you to get that return on your investment in the project. So now let's talk a little bit more about the importance of change management. Once you've established that your project has some people-dependent ROI, and you kind of know where it is on that scale, let's think about what those current state, transition state, and future states might look like with and without change management. So this kind of first graphic that you see here, everybody's moving together. You have a unified current state, not hard. Typically, everybody starts off with a unified current state. You move into the transition state together. It's a solid yellow block, lovely. You arrive at your green future state. Again, whole, complete, successful. What you see below that is what may be at risk of happening without change management or effective change management. So if you have everyone kind of going through a very rocky transition, they're not supported, they're not necessarily getting the help that they need to overcome their change barriers or to address resistance, you don't have everybody moving together through that transition state, you arrive at the future state incomplete. We call it the Swiss cheese future state. As you can see here, it's full of holes because you've left some folks behind in transition. They either haven't made it to the future state at all, or they haven't made it in your project timeline. So, they're still stuck in transition state when you're at go live. Not something you want. I think we're all pretty familiar with the risks that you can see listed out here on the right-hand side. Lower and or slower ROI once you're in your future state, employee dissatisfaction, or you can even lead to turnover, unachieved improvement or objectives, lower trust and confidence in leadership, definitely not something you want to see, and aversion to future changes. If somebody's gone through a change and it wasn't successful for them or it was a really miserable experience, they're not going to be likely to jump on board the next time they need to make a shift.
Sarah, I feel very fortunate that this webinar is after lunch. The Swiss cheese model, change management being like a 7-layer cake. A lot of food metaphors in change management. But what you're seeing on the screen here, and what we want to talk about in this investment section a bit, is we want to share some statistics gathered by ProSci. And as Sarah referenced earlier, they are the leading body of change management knowledge and research. Research has been performed by people whose job it is to research these topics. And the results have been charted into graphs and really tell an interesting story. So what we're looking at here is the project objective efficacy graph. This graph compares the percentage of respondents that rated their project as having met or exceeded stated project objectives to the value rating of change management efforts on their respective project. And as you can see, it's a very linear trend. And the study's particular sample size of projects, projects where people have rated change management efforts as excellent are 6 times more likely to exceed or meet project objectives than projects whose members rate their change management efforts as non-existent or poor. And I think it's something that, of course, is not the end-all be-all, but it's undeniable that it does help. And as a sponsorship or management team, I do feel like it is the responsibility to do everything you can in order to meet or exceed your project objectives. And we also think it's important from a invest in yourself perspective to consider some downstream costs and risks associated with particular areas. So on the screen, you can see these costs and risks charted by 3 categories. Costs and risks to the project if we do not manage the people side of change well, to the organization if we do not manage the people side of change well, and to the organization if the change does not deliver the results we expect. And while some of these may not be relevant to every project, and as we learned from Sarah earlier, the scale of change management is very dependent on the ROI gained by people changing behaviors. Change management does assist in attempting to avoid the costs and mitigate the risks. And again, change management is not the end-all be-all. Even good projects with excellent change management can sometimes run into these issues. But again, as the data shows, It does help. And when you're undergoing a significant organizational change, isn't it better to do everything in your power to avoid the avoidable? And speaking of large organizational changes, with CloudSuite being such a hot topic and at the forefront of the industry, it's important to consider, how does change management fit in with our CloudSuite implementations?
Thanks, Daniel. So for anybody who's attended some of the webinars earlier today, you're going to hear me touch on some of the same themes. But you might be asking yourself, when we go back and we think about that people-dependent ROI, isn't ERP really about tech, not people? Often these engagements are driven by IT. Why are people important to a software implementation? It's not as if system users are going to be able to go back and use their old system or legacy system if they don't like the new one. They'll have to change. So why is change management so important with something like a software implementation, ERP implementation? So let's talk a little bit about why people are still key. Ultimately, ERP solutions support business processes, and those processes rely largely on people. You have some automated stuff in there, but ultimately these are systems and solutions that are serving people to get their work done. These are also big projects, and like I mentioned earlier, they can result in burnout and turnover, and that's an expense at the end of the day, not to mention it affects morale, and morale affects productivity. So all of these things in a roundabout way can really end up affecting your bottom line. Resistance and barriers to change can interfere with the project timeline, and expansion of the project timeline always means expansion of the budget, almost without question. The business outcomes your organization hopes to achieve and the greatest return on your ERP investment are at stake. These are large, expensive projects. They represent a significant investment by the organizations that take them on, and you want to give them every opportunity to be supported and succeed and to really maximize that ROI at the end of the day. And last but certainly not least, your organization or business is run by your employees, and an investment in change management is an investment in them that they can feel. And that's huge. That's one of those kind of soft benefits, but it's still really crucial. Michael Grace, our boss, likes to point out that businesses and organizations always say, like, our greatest asset is our people. It's our people. They're so important. And you can say that all day long, but if you don't show them that that's true, if you don't back that up with support when they're going through transition, when they're having a hard time, they can tell that you're just talking the talk and you're not walking the walk. So I would like all of you who are tuning in to just indulge me a little bit. Go on a little thought journey / exercise with me for a second. It will just take a minute. Close your eyes if you want to, but think back on a project you've participated in that involved people-dependent change. It can be one that went well, one that went poorly, whatever pops into your mind first. And I just want you to think through the answers to these questions. Was everyone aware of what success would look like at the beginning of that project? Was the purpose and the value of that project understood by the stakeholders? Did you feel adequately considered or engaged in the process? Was communication clear, honest, and timely? Or were you getting messages that confused you and were coming your way the day before you were supposed to do something differently or a change was occurring? Was there established channels for giving feedback that you could trust would be received well by the appropriate parties and responded to? Or did it just kind of go into a black hole or you were dismissed? Were transition challenges and resistance addressed well or at all? And what kind of impact did the answers to these questions have on whether the project went well or poorly? And this brings us to how RPI in particular approaches change management, a little bit of the flavor that we bring as we apply the ProSci methodology, tools, techniques, strategy, all of that good stuff. Let's tell you how we deliver on this.
So ultimately, every organization is unique. Every project is different. And therefore, the approach to change management must be personalized for each of our clients. So RPI's approach is to put together a customized change management strategy tailored to your unique organization and your unique project. And this strategy is really focused around 3 key elements: assessing items such as organizational readiness, tailoring customized materials such as organizational communications plans, and enabling your people through sustainment plans to carry the change momentum from the project well into the future state. So one of our core components is applying the ADKAR assessment to your project, and ADKAR being named for the 5 phases that make up a change journey: awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and lastly, reinforcement. And it's important to note that these are sequential milestones. You can't really skip steps in the journey, and they are also aligned with project milestones. For example, a classic alignment is aligning ability with the project go live. So ensuring that at go live, at crunch time, the ability of your employees matches up perfectly to what is expected of them in the future state solution. So following this model ultimately helps identify and address potential barrier points and prepares your organization to sustain change. Another key model we follow is the Clark model, often referred to by us, if no one else, as the Clark Kent model, after Superman. The Clark model helps frame discussions with people managers who are absolutely critical to the success of any change management endeavors. Employees don't want to hear messages from change managers or consultants. Ultimately speaking, it's true. They're likely to just tune us out. However, they do listen to their managers and watch and model their behavior. So following the Clark model, with managers serving as communicators, liaisons, advocates, resistance managers, and coaches, helps prime not only your organization, but thinking even in more granular terms, your department and your closest coworkers for success in the new world.
Exactly, because like we talked about before, all of that organizational change comes down to the individual, and people managers have the trust of the individuals that are on their teams, and they're also really close to the change. It's a lot more personal of a message. It's much different than it coming from the sponsor or someone else like an outside change manager. Really has a different impact. They're the preferred messengers for that stuff for a reason.
Yeah, I like my CloudSuite implementations and migrations without Swiss cheese.
Yes. Not to knock Swiss cheese, though. It's still delicious. Just not what you want your project to look like. So last but not least, let's talk about what enabling sustainment looks like. The temptation is strong to get through go live, and then everybody just kind of breathes a big sigh of relief. You celebrate your success, and you can just kind of sit back and check out, right? No. Even if you make it to that complete future state with no holes in it, if you're not maintaining those changes and supporting those changes, it is possible, unfortunately, to backslide. So you can have a slice of American cheese and then, kind of starts to look a little bit more like Swiss. Nobody wants that. So, the bottom line is your change journey does not end with your last project milestone or phase, and you don't want your change management strategy to hit a wall there either. Enabling sustainment really means asking what is needed to ensure that we're maintaining and continuing to improve upon these changes. There's no reason that needs to be the dead stop in the evolutionary journey that you started with this project. As a team sport that really happens at the organizational level, sustainment requires the right roles and resources in place to plan and execute reinforcement activities. So we like to do a lot of knowledge transfer, make sure that the client understands what roles are involved and what the responsibilities are, and that they have the tools and techniques that we're leaving behind with them through that warm handoff to really continue that and not slide back into Swiss cheese land. So that is all that we have for you. It looks like we have about 4 minutes for Q&A. If anybody has burning questions about change management that they would love for us to answer on the spot, we're ready.
Thanks, Daniel and Sarah, for a wonderful presentation. Looks like no one's up for taking me up on my challenge. So I think that wraps up our day. Thanks everyone for attending. We'll be back with more webinars tomorrow.
Next time you got to tell them what the prize is.
There you go.
Just really dangle it up front.
It's a signed bobble stout.
Oh, that's good.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, signed bobble stout, Starbucks gift card.
Well, thank you so much.